Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Steelfur Speaks. In this episode, we talk about the Calling Birmingham. Now, normally I record these post-event episodes like immediately after the event from my hotel room. This time, however, I was at a calling in the UK, so there was in fact time for me to come home and get back to my normal setup before sitting down to record this video. That being said, for those of you that know me, I did actually record a version of this video last night when I got back to my hotel room, and I had maybe 4 or 5 pints of Guinness, and I watched it again this morning. I watched it last night, and I was like, this isn't that bad. And I watched it this morning, and I was like, no, I'm not posting that. I said some fun things. My eyes were going a bit crazy, but I just thought, actually, that's not really what we want to do. So I thought, let's re-record the non 4 pints of beer video. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I am Steelfur, aka the host of Steelfur Speaks for now, and I'm a UK-based flesh and blood content creator. Been around for years. Like to talk about the game in a fair and unbiased way. Talk about what's happening, good, bad. See how things pan out. Talk about things I'm excited for. Talk about the things I'm not excited for, and sort of see how things are going. In this episode, we are talking about the Calling Birmingham. People who are there might have seen me writing in my little blue book. I use it for more than just tracking life totals. Over the week, I would have been putting notes in about various things in the tournament, like any issues with judging, any issues with prizing, tournament structure, organization, sort of an idea of how the commentating, the casting, the perception of the event was to the outside world, as well as an understanding of sort of the meta and how it felt to actually play in the tournament, as well as other things that were going on. So I like to take those notes, and I put those notes out there. I don't put those notes out there, but I like to take notes during the event and give this kind of general feedback about how the event went, both from a personal perspective and from a looking at this as an external person trying to say, was this a good event? What could have been better? Where could we have done better and improved? So to start off with the personal side of things, so normally these event reviews come with kind of a game-by-game breakdown of who I played in each round of the large event, because normally I'll be playing 13, 14 plus rounds of the main event, and I want to talk about who I faced and what went well and what didn't go well and how things could be taken. But of course, for those of you who watched the last episode of Steelfur Speaks, which came out about 2 weeks ago, you'll know that this calling we went into with a different mentality, right? I had come from my break from Fab. I had come from not playing the game that often, and really coming into this calling incredibly unprepared, to the extent that if it had not been in the UK, if it had been in like Antwerp or Belgium or Spain or somewhere where I could maybe refund a hotel or refund a train ticket or something like that, maybe I wouldn't have gone because I was very unprepared previously, in my previous mentality, right? But the new mentality was, let's go, and even if the main event goes terribly, I'm not getting tilted. I'm going to have the best time I possibly can. And you know what? I want to report that was an absolute success, right? Just an amazing success. So, over the course of the weekend, on Friday, I played in the Light versus Dark Shapeshifter event, okay, and went 3-1. I went into the Calling. I won the first 2 rounds, and then I lost the next 3 rounds. Then I went and played a Blitz side event as Dash and went 2-2. Then I went to play another CC side event, changing decks from the Calling. And then on Sunday, I had a bit of a lie-in and then came and played Commoner. Then I did a Monarch draft, and then I went and did more Blitz, right? So over the course of the weekend, I played every single format that was available, bar sealed WTR and UPF. So aside from that, I played every single other format that was available. Commoner, Draft. I didn't play Alpha WTR Draft, but I did open an Alpha WTR pack, which we'll get to later when we talk about the prizing. And you know what? Every single format I played was good. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we review the structure of the event. So, from my personal experience, we start off with Shapeshifter Sealed. Shapeshifter Sealed is a weird format, right? So, you go in, you can pick any hero and any weapon, and you can play any card. And what has invariably happened in all of the Shapeshifter Sealed events that I've played in is that you've taken the weapon that is best for fatigue, i.e. Kodachi's, maybe Romping Club, depending on how many yellows you got, versus zero costs. So if you got a lot of zero costs, you played Kodachi's, and if you didn't, you played Romping Clubs. And then you put in all the 3 blocks that you could find into your deck, and then it basically turned into a fatigue format game, right? This, however, was a bit different. So this was Light versus Shadow Shapeshifter Sealed. And that meant that you could only pick token heroes from Monarch or Dusk to Dawn. So you couldn't pick Vincent or New Prism because they're not token heroes. But you could play Bolton, Levia, Prism, Old Prism, or Chain, right? One of those 4 heroes. You could also play any of the cards in the set, Light or Shadow. When I originally heard about this event, because it's a Light versus Shadow event, I heard that the rules were supposed to be you could either play all of Light or all of Shadow, but they changed that and you were allowed to play any amount of Shadow or Light cards. What that meant was that fatigue strategy that we talked about before really was amplified because some people in their 6 packs opened 53 cards that block 3, and you can understand how hard it is for a low power format when most heroes can't really go again beyond 1 to 2 attacks to get any amount of damage through when your opponent has 53 cards in your deck. There was one other big thing that was impacting this format, and that was the role of Blood Debt. Only one of the heroes in the Monarch set has the ability to turn off Blood Debt damage, and making that consistent turn off, even when you're playing Levia, is very, very difficult in a Shapeshifter Sealed format because you don't necessarily get that many 6 power cards, and you don't necessarily get enough cards that banish to turn on those effects. Now, there are some things that make it slightly easier because the way Levia is worded, you can banish heralds. So if you get enough heralds that have 6 power and enough cards that banish, you can kind of consistently banishing 6 powers while also not banishing 6 powers with Blood Debt. But most people weren't playing Levia. People were either playing Chain because Chain's Shackle ability can give any Shadow Brute card go again because it's a Shadow card, as he gives Shadow and Runeblade cards go again. Or they were playing Bolton because anytime you give a plus bonus to an attack, like with, say, some of the Levia bonuses or some of the, the Shadow boosts that Chain cards can do, you can give them go again, right? So a lot of people were doing sequences like that where they'd play a non-attack action, they'd attack with something, Bolton related, they'd banish a Shadow card, and then they'd be able to play that Shadow card from banish, because they'd be banishing the Shadow card that they banished to their soul to give the attack they charged go again, and then they play the card that they banished out of the banish zone because they could do it that way. So there was a lot of interesting synergies, but for me, the format was really ruined by 2 things. Okay, the first thing is just the deck size and people being able to play as many 3-card blocks as they opened. I've kind of given the feedback before that Shapeshifter Sealed really needs to not be an unlimited deck size format. You need to put a limit of like 30 to 35 cards. Yes, people will still fatigue, but it's much, much more likely that everyone has opened at least 30 cards that block 3. And that means that it's impossible to just grossly out deck size someone. So if someone thinks, well, the minimum card size is 30 and presents that and builds a very good aggro deck, sometimes they can still win through fatigue, but most of the time, the person who built the 53 card deck is going to win. The other single problematic thing was the card, what is it, Dead, one second. I know the card we're talking about, yeah, Deadwood Rumbler. Let's just bring this up and talk through the interaction properly. Right, so you look at this card, and in draft, this is actually quite a good card. It has a lot of power, right? It's, it's a 3 for 8. It doesn't block, but In Levia, you kind of play this early on. You're not banishing cards with Blood Debt because you can choose which cards. So if you play this early on and you do hit a 6, you fill your graveyard and you just banish a card that doesn't have Blood Debt, maybe isn't a 6, to make your graveyard more efficient. So Deadwood Rumbler is actually quite good for filling your graveyard in Levia, and it does get played even in draft. I actually quite like it when I'm drafting Levia. It doesn't count as a popper because it can't block, but it does count as a 6 power for all your banish effects. So you often end up with a couple of these if you're drafting Levia, right? It's a good card. But the important thing here, I mean, the incredibly important thing here, above anything else in Shapeshifter Sealed, is the fact that if you read this line, banish a card from a graveyard. It doesn't say your graveyard, it says a graveyard. The most degenerate play that I have seen this entire weekend, right, and it happened repeatedly, right, is about Blood Debt. I've talked about why it's a problem. If you put any Blood Debt in your banished zone and you could not turn it off, so you weren't playing Levia, your opponent, who was already leaning towards fatigue, would just block until the Blood Debt killed you. And I'm talking like 16 turns of blocking, and you take 16 Blood Debt and die, right? That was the problem with this format. Now, the astute people here are seeing Deadwood Rumbler and saying banish a card from a graveyard, and realizing that if everyone's playing some of the Blood Debt cards, because some of them do block for 3, and you need those 3 blocks to match the fatigue game plan, I can play my Deadwood Rumbler, and if I hit a 6, I can banish one of your Blood Debt cards, and then I can block until I win through Blood Debt. And that was happening. So there are some issues with the Light versus Shadow Sealed. In general, it was quite fun. Very thematic and evocative, and it was very fun to be able to play Dust to Dawn and that kind of thing. I would say this isn't something you can fix, but I do think there needs to be a deck limit size to stop someone slamming 53 cards in and just trying to block their way through the entire tournament. I feel like that ruins the fun for a lot of people, especially because this is an entry-level format. Okay, that's fine. So moving on then from talking about that, which is the first event I played in, let's just talk about CC. We go to the Handy Flesh and Blood website. We can see the meta breakdown for the initial CC. I'm in here somewhere. I ended up playing Lexi. And we can see that this is really diverse. There were, I think, 427 players, which is fantastic. And the hero diversity is great. Like, we knew Lexi was going to be on top. She is seen as the best deck. But the fact that you have like lots of Dromai, lots of Bravo, lots of people trying to get Briar retired. New Levia just got loads of people really excited. There's still a few ninjas. There's still a few Icelanders, even Viserais, Azuris. Like, the fact is that we have over 10 heroes with around 20 players representing them. And obviously the more popular ones have double that. But this is really, really good. And actually just, delightful to see, And at times, it really did feel like, especially if you were watching bits of day 2, that any of these heroes could win the top 8. And if we scroll up, you'll see that the diversity, we're going to talk about cosplay in a bit, but the diversity continues into this. Now, if you think about conversion ratios, they're actually fairly, I'm not going to say even, but they're fairly sensible across these numbers. 20 Levia. Well, Levia was the worst, but 60 Lexis turns into 23 Lexis, 40 Bravos turns into 13. Heroes came and they performed, and then they made the top cut. And day 2 being similarly as diverse shows you that these heroes didn't fall off, and actually our undefeated decks weren't Lexi, Bravo, and Dromai. I think they were Dash and Katsu. So, just seeing that diversity continues is really good, and it kind of demonstrates the fact that we are in a really good meta. And what you'll see when we look at like the top cut and how things worked out in the calling, you can see that, yes, okay, Bravo was the most dominant deck, and Bravo made it to both the semifinals. But I think this is kind of important. How many heroes are actually in the top cut? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So out of the 8 that were kind of well represented, only 3 of them fell off between day 1, day 2, and the top cut. And maybe, okay, Levia should have made it through a bit more, but she is new and she's not solved, whereas these decks have a lot more sort of staying power in them. But isn't that just really fantastic? You know, we have seen top cuts where it was 50% one hero or more, and that was the meta that we were dealing with. Whereas in this one, we have 5 heroes represented. The finals, okay, showed us that Bravo is very strong because there was Bravo in both the semi-finals, but it didn't win the tournament. And of course, the other thing that's very interesting about this is that Lexi, being the most powerful deck, didn't make its way through to the top 8 at all because people targeted it. And then they made it through the Swiss, but then when they got into the higher tables on day 2, they realized that all the Bravos and the Katsus and the Icelanders were all there for Lexi because they knew it would be most represented, which tells us that there's also a maturity to this meta where the best players knew what was coming and then used that knowledge to build a deck that could counter and target things, which I think is really interesting. So I was really happy with the meta at the Calling. In general, also, I should say, I was really happy with the meta at the Blitz event as well. I looked at the Battle Hardened. I looked at the fact that there were all of these decks. And when I was rolling through the top tables and just having a bit of a look around at what was going on, I saw Prism, I saw Bravo, I saw Riptide, I saw Levia, I saw Ira, I saw Dash, I saw Kano, I saw more Kasai and Chain. They were the most popular. But these heroes, even to about here, were all actually represented at the top tables going into like sort of the later parts of the event. And then when we get to the top cut, you again see that diversity coming through. You know, you have Ira, you have Chain, you have a Kasai, you have a Kano, you have a Phi, you have a Briar. Okay, there were 2 Kanos, but there was one, every other class was different. And that is just brilliant, right? It genuinely is. So when we're reviewing the meta and we're thinking about the meta, Fab has never been more diverse. It's never been more interesting. And we're getting a real depth and a weight to the game after the 10 sets, which we probably haven't had before. And we're getting a maturity in design and balance that is being, you know, demonstrated through small tweaks like banning bullseye bracers rather than doing something more drastic like banning 3 of a kind, for example, right? And they're letting the meta evolve then to tackle the Lexi problem after that small tweak has been made. And that's brilliant, right? This is brilliant. So I'm actually really happy with both the Blitz and the CC meta. And that kind of sums up my own experience of playing in the Calling. You know, I won games because Lexi is strong and I'm a decent player. And then I lost games because people had teched against Lexi and you had to play Lexi very, very well to beat their tech. And I didn't have the reps to do that. But I don't regret playing Lexi because the whole point about playing Lexi was that she was a good aggro deck and I could play her and it would be fun. So I did that. And then I went and played Blitz and I borrowed a deck from someone and, you know, I played Dash and it was fun. And I, you know, could have borrowed a Kasai deck or I could have borrowed a Chain deck. But, you know, I haven't played Dash in a while and playing aggro Dash is a bit of fun and I had a good time. And I didn't feel like when I was playing that any of the matchups were so horrible that I couldn't just play and maybe win. And that was really all I was looking for. What actually surprised me most, I mean, I went back and played Phi in the second CC tournament, and that was fine as well. We know how Phi does in CC. We can also say commiserations to George Roger, the UK national champion, who went X2 in the Calling on Phi and unfortunately finished 9th. He was the only X2, I believe, who finished 9th and didn't make the top 8. And that is just a unfortunate coincidence of the size of the tournament, where... So we wouldn't have actually increased the number of rounds unless we got another 112 players or something, I think. Around 120, maybe 112 players. But if we had had slightly more, there would have been more X2s who didn't make it in. It's just a little weird feature about the fact that the exact number we had meant there would be one X2 who didn't make it into the top 8. Whereas if we had had slightly more players, there would have been like 10, 15 X2s who didn't make it into the top 8. So it wouldn't have felt maybe as bad. But George himself definitely felt that if he had won that last game, which he did, that he made it into the top 8. And then it was a bit weird that he didn't. And that's a bit sad. So, we'll pour one out for him. It's just a tragedy if you get that score and you don't make it into the top 8. But obviously everyone else did do X2 or better and then made it in with the slightly stronger record. Then also, I should say, in kind of like the final part of our format review, because unfortunately I didn't really pay attention to UPF that much because I wasn't playing in it, but just to say that Commoner gave me very, very similar feelings to what I've just said about Blitz. There were lots of different decks. It kind of just felt like playing Blitz with a few less like complex cards, and it actually genuinely felt like a great experience. It felt like there's still a lot of exploring to do in that format, and it kind of felt like maybe Stubby Hammerer should still be banned, but overall I felt Commoner was actually brilliant. The number of decks I saw, the number of people having fun, and the fact that any of the decks that I played were worth about £10, so you could build 10 decks for Commoner, and they feel really good. Commons in this game feel really good. It just felt like a slightly less like powered or complex version of Blitz, but still really enjoyable. So I went from being skeptical about the Commoner format to being like super enthusiastic about the Commoner format just because I borrowed a deck and gave it some time and played it. So if you haven't played Commoner, please do. If you haven't got a regular Commoner evening at your stores, I recommend it. And you know what? After playing it for a bit, I think if you're getting new players in regularly and you don't have a Commoner night, I feel like you're letting them down, because I think that's the perfect format for them to enter into the game to, and really what Fabs needs to get people in the door without asking them to buy loads of legendaries to compete at their local Blitz. So, Commoner was great. The meta seems fantastic. I also should say, like, it really feels like the game has turned a corner in terms of formats available for side events. We've gone from just like, oh, you can draft, or you can do sealed, or you can play Blitz or CC. The fact that there's Commoner going around, the fact there's UPF going around is just such a huge deal. And I think the fact that there's different sets and all these kind of things being made available meant that the side event formats felt so diverse that you could, and I did, go to the Calling and just play side events and play different formats every single time and have a completely different Fab experience, every couple of hours. And I feel like that is where the game needs to be, and it's just a fantastic feeling and experience. And the other thing I want to talk about in that vein, which is actually very close to my heart because one of my friends, you can see him here, Dan, is very, very big into cosplay, is that the cosplay tournament keeps going from strength to strength, right? And kudos to Flesh and Blood, LSS, and LSS has stepped their game up once again. So we had Taylor as a cosplay prize, and that was fantastic, but they've only just turned around, and I didn't know this was happening, and made cosplay participation prizes and runner-up prizes. So now, yeah, you can get Taylor, but if you don't get Taylor, you get Taylor's offhand, and you get 2 fabrics, and guess what? If you're playing Taylor, the fabrics can be built into the tunic and the Blossom of Spring. So you can actually like block for 2 with your, or block for 3 with your Flamescale Furnace, and then when it's destroyed, you can play through your deck and you can build these fabrics into Tunic and Blossom of Spring. And how amazing is that? And they also come with this fantastic playmat that's based on the Blossom of Spring. And there's also participation prizes for 20 people. 20 people, like, get in there, start doing cosplay, like, put some time into it, and you will walk away with it. I think the participation prize is a needle playmat. Like, imagine walking away with a needle playmat and, how great that would feel. So the fact they've gone from one big prize, I know sometimes they gave out a lore book as well, to offering participation prizes and playmats and stuff like that is just fantastic, right? And we've gone from the first European Calling having one entrant, lovely Dan, who played his Spring Tunic cosplay, and he was disappointed there was no one else there. He wanted competition and to talk about cosplay with people, but obviously he won because he was the only person who showed up to the first European Calling, to having 4 entrants and more, to people making light up masks and fire and picking their favorite cards, to someone with a floating hand, to someone dressed up as a ninja from a specific card. Like, cosplay goes from strength to strength, and it is fantastic that LSS are recognizing that by putting in participation promos and allowing the possibility that 20 or more people could enter a cosplay contest and walk away with a playmat. How fantastic is that? So, I mean, I think that just needs to be shouted out, because, I mean, the cosplay contest, I've said this before in other games I played, in Legend of the Five Rings, some of the most dedicated, friendly, nicest members of the community are the people who are doing cosplay, because they are there not just for the enjoyment of playing the cards. They're there not just at the tournament to win. They've put in hours of dedication into something beyond the card game that speaks to community and involvement and investment. And that itself should be rewarded and acknowledged by the organizers. And it was with Taylor, but, you know, with runner-up prizes and playmats and participation prizes for people who try but aren't quite good enough yet, it just goes from strength to strength. So I think that needs to be acknowledged as a standout thing. So really what we have is Callings going from being a show up to play main event CC or whatever the main event is, and maybe you can do a draft or a side event battle hardened in another format, to, hey, do you want to do a UPF? Do you want to do a commoner? Do you want to do a cosplay? You know, do you want to do on-demand drafts with your friends? Do you want to just fire up, you know, a classic constructed tournament and play a different deck? Like, you could bring 4 different decks and play 5 different formats if you include draft, or maybe 6 if you include sealed, and you could be playing a different format every other day of the thing, even if you're not winning, even if you're not, well, Mr. Pablo Pintor here, gorgeous man who obviously was crushing it with Bravo and got to the finals. But you don't have to be Pablo to have a great time at the Calling. Though, I mean, if you're at the Calling, you can probably say hello to Pablo. He's very friendly. But my point is, it feels like these events are starting to come alive, and it feels like it's 427 people, but there's more there than just the tournament. There's more like community, and I feel like Calling Birmingham was something that really kind of emphasized this for me. It just felt like the game has changed and exploded in formats and flexibility, creating tons of opportunity for fun. And I think that is a vital sort of step and move forward, and the cosplay is the perfect iteration of that. Okay, so I've waxed lyrical about formats. Let's talk a bit about pricing. In general, the Calling pricing is kind of the same. You know, reasonably good amounts of prizes for playing the Calling and doing well, cash pricing, that kind of thing. Side event pricing continued to be good. The addition of the cold foil tokens to the prize wall for a very affordable 400 or 600 tokens. So you could win, if you go 4-0 in one of the side events, you usually get 600 tokens, enough for one. But even if you only win one game in most of the side events, you get 160. So if you win one game in 3 side events, you can still buy your cold foil token. And that's really good, right? And then you have the addition of Alpha WTR and Beta Arcane Rising and First Edition Crucible of War to the prize wall. I think there were 2 boxes of each on the prize wall. Those are fantastic chase-like prizes that people can get. Now, getting 1,200 tickets, which is how much a pack of WTR Alpha costs, does require a significant commitment to side events and does require you to get a winning score, you know, in a few side events, because the pricing is kind of cumulative. So you get 160 for one win, but you get 600 for 3 wins, you know, that kind of stuff. But if you do that, and if that's your goal for the weekend, I feel like it is a reasonably attainable goal for someone to get like 1 Alpha pack and open it. And since Alpha is very expensive and hard to find, and a pack is worth 180, 200 pounds, doing that and having that experience available on the prize wall, fantastic. I personally, you can see the video of it, opened an Alpha pack and a Beta pack. In the Alpha pack, I opened the cold foil in the box, a Barkbone strapping, which I sold to a local player in the UK who plays Rhinar and Blitz, and he's going to look at that card every week, so that's fantastic. I love it when it goes into the hands of a player. And opening that pack, even without the fact that I had opened a cold foil, watching my friends open the packs that they had earned, felt fantastic. Just that chance to do something you will find it difficult to do in the game unless you have a lot of money, and even then, a lot of the time when you're opening packs now, you buy a box break, because that way the pack hasn't been searched and the box hasn't been searched. You get a brand new box and 24 people, split the packs. But then someone like Chris Sayers opens it for you and posts you the cards rather than you opening it yourself. So this was a very rare opportunity for someone, just casually in the game to get their hands on an alpha pack from a fresh box and actually open it themselves, which is brilliant. So I want to say having those in the prize wall as like a chase upper thing that you could get was fantastic. Also, the giant cards, especially the new ones had this sort of like extra thickness, which meant they were a lot more sturdy. Actually very, very popular, especially the Levia one. A load of people were really going for those, so those proved to be really, really good. I've never really appreciated them before because obviously I wouldn't be able to take them home on the train, but having them at the UK calling meant I could take one home if I had won one. I didn't, but that's okay. I chose to get alpha instead, but I think they were there. People really appreciated them, so those were really cool as well. So everything on the prize wall was actually great. Cold foil tokens, the addition of the alpha and beta packs, something I would highly recommend. They were really popular, and the giant heroes were also really popular as well. Also, the pricing for the cosplay contest we've already talked about. One other change that I really want to hammer home was brilliant was that the Battle Hardened had an entry prize, right? It had I think a set of heralds. It doesn't always have that, but I think it is very, very good that it does have that, because even if you enter the Battle Hardened, you do leave with something, and I think it had a playmat and some entry prizes. I think it's vital to keep that as a bare minimum, so that, because normally in the Battle Hardened, the only people who get prizes are the top 8. You see this lovely smiling guy from the UK, Jiang, who came first. He got his gold foil Crown of Dominion. Normally, the top 8 are the ones who get the prizes in Battle Hunt. I think it is so vital, especially at these large events, to incentivize people to sign up to the Battle Hardened by having that entry prize, so they feel like they haven't just spent a whole day and got nothing and been beaten and lost, but they actually get to take something away with them. And also it does kind of help to allay the costs a bit, because people in other countries who haven't got that same reward do chip in and buy them and things like that. So it can also ease the cost burden, because it can be quite expensive to sign up to a calling, to sign up to the Battle Hardened. You're looking at £200-300 just on, well, maybe £200 just on tickets over the weekend to play in events and side events and stuff. And adding just a promo that can kind of ease that, or let people, sell it on, trade it, that kind of thing, give a bit of an event exclusive vibe, does actually help. It helps defray costs. It also helps make people feel better. So I think on the pricing front, that change was brilliant. Hopefully they keep it up. But, I thought that was good. So we talked about the meta a bit. We've talked about the event format. I was really happy with that. We've talked about the pricing. The commentating, I haven't actually been able to sit down and watch a lot of the commentating, but the bits I have seen were fantastic. From what I've heard, the guys at Push the Point did a great job. The guys at Tabletop 24 did a really good job with the camera work, and I know Baz from Baz the Bard apparently did a lot of really good work as the MC. I heard generally good feedback talking to people throughout the event who said the casting was really great. And also one of the things I thought people gave, which was very good feedback, which was that the P2P Push the Point guys were very present at the event. They judged the cosplay contest. I have heard feedback from some of the cosplay guys that they wished that there had been someone more technical in the cosplay judges, because at some of the other events there's been more detailed feedback about their costume and how they could improve it, and suggestions on techniques and things to try, which they really valued. So some of the cosplay guys were like, it's good that Push the Point did it, but it would have been nice if LSS had found someone, like a Miss Chalice or someone who's a cosplayer, to come along to the event, even if it's just for the cosplay contest itself, and to actually judge and provide sort of technical feedback and inspiration to the cosplay contests. Because as it was, Push the Point were given guidelines, as they should be, right? They're not just thrown in and been like, oh, pick a winner. LSS said, hey, you can choose, you can decide. Here are some guidelines to help you figure out like performance, execution, complexity, inspiration, like all these criteria. I don't know exactly what they are, but that's good. But it was just felt like maybe someone with more technical cosplay knowledge being involved alongside the flavor casters. But in general, the feedback that having them there judging that kind of thing, having them there for the raffles, all those kind of things, they were very felt during the event, even by people playing it. One of the risks that can happen with casters at events like this, especially if you've got a smaller casting team, like 2-3 people, is that the casters end up being so busy casting, and this definitely happened when I casted Krakow. We weren't really that present in the event because there were only 2 of us, so we were just always casting, right, something. So we couldn't go out and be on the show floor, and that creates that dichotomy between the casters who are casting for the people at home and the people at the event. So one of the things that was really good about this is there was space in the schedule for Push the Point to step off the casting and actually just be involved in the event in a kind of active way. And I think people really appreciated that. So that was good. Good feedback on that. The only other thing really to talk about is just issues with judging. I always like to sort of get a temperature of the room in terms of how people are doing and how people feel about the judge team. See our lovely judge team here. In general, the feeling was quite positive. You know, the head judge, I know certainly James, very, very good head judge. Some of the team leads as well, very, very good. There was a bit of negative feedback or friction just about the length of time that it was taking to resolve what are considered to be simple judge calls. You know, the sort of judge calls where the players kind of know the resolution, but they still have to call a judge and get a judge to talk through it because that's how you solve it and you make sure it's fair for both players and all these kind of things we're talking about. There was some kind of feedback that some of the sort of lower level judges were on their phones a bit too much trying to figure out the exact resolution, where like actually what you need to be doing is you know, these are the sort of things that as a player of the game are relatively easy to solve, and as a judge should be off the cuff fairly easy to solve. It's not really a huge criticism. It kind of just gives us an implication that there's still a bit of leveling up to do when it comes to the European judge scene, maybe. Not across all of the European judges, and I know we were competing with some of the judges for with Pro Tour Barcelona because some of the judges are Fab and Magic judges, but there was kind of generally a feeling that, you know, there were simple judge calls that were taking a bit too long to resolve, which was causing players to get frustrated because the judge was just, you know, looking through their phone trying to find the answer to a very simple question. And obviously players need confidence that the judge team knows the rules better than them, and when the players are sitting at the table being like, I'm pretty sure we know how this goes, and the judge is taking, you know, 5 or 6 minutes to figure out a solution, that is a problem, right? So I think that does kind of indicate that there is maybe a lack of practical experience, maybe in some of the lower, you know, the newer judges. Maybe they just need to spend a bit more time playing the game so they know these easy resolutions off the cuff and they can just throw them out there. Not really a huge criticism, but more just like, you know, it gives us a sort of roadmap and a path for people to follow, which I think is kind of interesting. Aside from that, I thought there weren't really many huge issues. There was one issue on the stream, I think, that got pointed out to me. I brought up the video so we can watch it. That we see Katsu in the top 8. We can just put this on here. And we can see that he's playing Zephyr Needle into Bravo, which is a really odd choice. Because Zephyr Needle will break if it's blocked with 3. And the fact that he's chosen to do this is a bit strange. But then we see in this game, is it here? Where does it happen? I think it's here. So I think it's coming up next, right? So
we do have an errata bulletin. The functional changes to the Zephyr Needle.
My understanding, as I play Zephyr Needle a lot in my Ira Blitz deck, is if at any point it is blocked by a card with greater than its base, it is destroyed. Doesn't matter if you buff.
So on the stream, they're just talking about Zephyr Needle interactions. There was a change to the Zephyr Needle just to clarify it, but it was a clarity errata. It wasn't really a functional errata. Zephyr Needle gets triggered when it's blocked by something with more defense than its power, right? So if I attack for 2 and it gets blocked for 3, it triggers a destruction effect, and that kind of gives us a Oh, I see. The stream hasn't really updated properly. Ah, okay. That's what's going on. So this is what I actually wanted to show you, but the image wasn't updating. So he attacks with Zephyr Needle. It gets blocked for 3, and then he Razor Reflexes the Zephyr Needle, right? What happens here is that the destruction of the Zephyr Needle is triggered by Warmonger's Resolve, and then when you Razor it, it still gets destroyed, right? And this is a bit of a problematic interaction, not because he's doing it, but because of... So, the fact that he's doing it in the top 8, and the fact that there's this many Bravos in the tournament, kind of gives us the implication that this has potentially happened before, because he's been playing Zephyr Needle probably into Bravo the entire time. And I know from speaking to one of his earlier opponents in the game, I'm not trying to start a witch hunt. I'm trying to talk about the interpretation of the rules, and I'm trying to talk about the fact that, you know, we need to be aware that this stuff is going on, because that's how we ensure that people play correctly, and that's how we ensure that we make sure that everything is going smoothly. So we have this interaction. We have the errata bulletin number 5, which is on the Flesh and Blood website, and there were some triggering problems where you could not destroy a Zephyr Needle if you did certain things. So they changed Zephyr Needle basically to get destroyed when the combat chain closes, but they just made it clear that the trigger starts when it's defended. It doesn't get destroyed until the combat chain closes, but the trigger starts when it is defended. So if someone blocks for 3, it will create a trigger that destroys it, regardless of what happens after that, right? So even if you buff the card, it still gets destroyed, right? Now this is in the rules, it's very clear, and as far as I know, and I may be wrong, the card has always worked that way. People got confused originally because Ira usually made Zephyr Needle come in for 3, which meant that it was safe from initial blocks in the defense step, and then could only be destroyed by defense reactions, which block for 4, right? So Ira would always make Zephyr Needle safe into the defense reaction step, but not... if someone say blocked for 3 and then played a... if someone blocked with a defense reaction, then you could raise a reflex and save the Zephyr Needle, right? So for Ira, this always worked, but it never worked for Katsu, and we never played Zephyr Needle and Katsu in the same way, because anytime it blocked for 3, it immediately got destroyed, right? So this ruling is a bit, this instance is a bit tricky, right? Because we then see he continues his turn, right? And Zephyr Needle doesn't get destroyed until the combat chain closes, so that's fine. And then we see him put Zephyr Needle back, end the turn, and not destroy it, at which point there is a judge call, and he is told, actually, the Zephyr Needle gets destroyed, right? And the reason that this is difficult, is that this is in the top 8, right? And the reason this is difficult, again, and this is where the journalistic side of this channel comes into play, is that I have talked to other opponents of this Katsu player who were playing Bravo and who had judges during the tournament and called out this specific thing, and the judges told him how the interaction works and destroyed Zephyr Needle previously. So that means the fact this has happened again is not a good look. Now, I'm not saying that he cheated. That's not where we're going. We're not going on a witch hunt here. That's not what I'm about. But as you can see, even in the chat, there is confusion about how this ruling goes. And I wonder, and I couldn't figure out the answer to this, even talking to a few judges, whether he got different answers from different judges throughout the day about whether or not this happened. Because you can even see Shamir in the... Well, maybe you can't see him in the comments, but I can see him in the comments section saying, Needle is fine, it checks on chain close, which is not true. The destruction effect is triggered when it's blocked and destroys it regardless of when the check is, right? So even if Shamir can even be confused, then it's possible that multiple judges were confused throughout the day, and this Katsu player is thinking, well, so one judge said I couldn't do it, the other judge said I could, therefore, what do I do? But we don't know. He could also have been told no by every judge, but thought, hey, I'm in the top 8, let's try and push through damage. So it's a bit tricky, right? It's a bit tricky. That particular interaction, it might be something that needs to be investigated to find out how many games he played versus Bravo where this happened and judges were called. Like, because if he then took it to the top 8, it needs to be discussed. But also, like, if it is the other thing and it wasn't, he was corrected once and no one then knew that he had been corrected previously by the time he made the top 8, then that kind of implies a breakdown in communication. The judge who made that ruling should have a note of it. In an ideal world, should have a note of it, and when that guy makes the top 8, that name, that note that was made suddenly becomes more relevant and makes it to the top of the head judge's list. It's kind of interesting. Like, majority of judge calls do not generate paperwork, and it is better for it to be that way. But you can kind of see the downfall of this kind of solution and system when it's hard to be consistent about what happened. Like, I entirely trust the player who told me about the judge call and the ruling that happened at their game, but I'm looking at this game and saying, if he was told by a judge earlier on that day, that's not how Zephyr works, and he tried to do it again in the final, I'm saying, what caused that? Is it a different judge told him the first judge was wrong, you can do it on stream? But if you have that kind of problem and that kind of interaction where a judge tells you something and you think, hey, that's wrong, the person you go to find a final answer for the tournament is the head judge. So if you're a player and you have this kind of thing where you think a judge has made the wrong decision in a match and the match is over and it's already done, but you want to double check, what you should do, if you haven't, firstly, you should appeal it when the call is made if you think it's wrong. But if you don't realize it's wrong and then, later on you're going to go through and you're going to try and think, hey, this might have been wrong, you go to the head judge of the tournament and you say, this happened in my game, I think the judge was incorrect. Was the judge incorrect? And you get that clarification, right? And then when it happens again on stream later on, you can say to the person judging the table, no, I went to the head judge and they said this is how it works. And if they have told me it's wrong, I get, like, if they have told you it's wrong and you've based your whole strategy around it, something has gone horribly wrong with the tournament, and you may even get an exception to that rule because it was said to you in a certain way for the duration of the tournament. And then after the tournament, the head judge and LSS will clarify exactly how it works to avoid that mix-up in the future, right? So if in this instance, for example, the Katsu player had this ruling in an earlier game, it had been clarified then he had gone to the head judge after the game and said, I think that's wrong. The head judge had said, yes, that's wrong. You can do it on stream. And then he did it on stream and the judge said no. He would be like, well, the head judge said it was okay. He would probably be allowed to continue with it. And then if it turned out it wasn't okay afterwards, then there would be a review of how it happened. The head judge would have to have a discussion with LSS, and it would be a bulletin clarified to the community. Actually, it works this way. Sorry that we did it wrong, but we couldn't interfere with the player because we told him it's how it works, right? Or something along those lines. The fact that hasn't happened kind of is where the problem comes in. Because either the player deliberately is, well, I got that ruling, but I'm going to try it again, which isn't a good look and is not great, or something else. So that's the only instance I can really find where I'm not really entirely either sure what happened or, happy with what's going on. I don't really like the idea that something that happened in an earlier round was then done again in a top 8 and, the way it went. So, yeah, it's a bit tricky. So that's all I want to call attention to on the judging side of things. Those two things, just the fact that it feels like there could be faster resolution of simple calls, which kind of implies that more entry-level judges, if judging is your passion in the EU, you should be getting out there and just playing games and playing plenty of blitz and fast games and just getting those little interactions and triggers and sequencing and things like that just ingrained in your head by playing the game and not just, relying on the comprehensive rules to effectively make calls. Because really, players, need to have faith in the judges to make calls fast and to, know the rules better than them, and to really speedy resolution, because it does add up over the course of a day if lots of judge calls take a lot of time. And if you're a team lead and you're seeing that your team is, on their phone trying to find the specific thing in the comprehensive rules, you're going to have to go in and intercede, and team leads maybe shouldn't have to intercede that often in judge calls, especially if they're not particularly complicated ones. So that's just kind of a bit of feedback on the judging. Overall, as I said, the judging quality was very high. I think both of the head judges knew their stuff very well. I especially know James, fantastic head judge. And I know that some of the UK team like Steve and Jason and things like that have a really good grasp of sort of playing the game and the rules. So it's great to see them doing more and being involved more. I've met most of the people in the front row of this, and they're all great. So, the judging was of a generally high quality, but I just have those two pieces of feedback, which looks like places where either there needs to be a bit of a look in to see what happened, or maybe just a general approach to leveling yourself up as a judge to make sure you're playing a certain number of games and you get those reps in that let you solve these problems quicker at the table without, having to consult comprehensive rule books and checking on your phone and things like that. So that's it. That's the last piece of feedback really about the event. Thank you for listening. I feel like the calling was fantastic, both from my personal perspective. I had so much fun, and also I think from an organization perspective, I think Living Realms and the Fabio team did a fantastic job. I think the casting was great. I wish I could have participated in the casting, but such as it is, you don't always need more people. And also, I was on a break, so I didn't even ask. Let's not even get cheeky. I think the Push the Point lads did a great job, and there was plenty of them to cast, and I was not knocking on their door in January when I wasn't really playing the game, being like, oh, I need to get involved in this. I was happy to just let them continue on and not ask. And even if I had asked, they might have been like, nah, we got this, mate, because I know them and they can talk to me like that. But it was good, and everything was good, and the formats were diverse, and the side events were fun, and just the emotion, the location was great, and the feelings was great, and the number of people who've just been coming into Discords and thanking people they met and saying how much of a good time they had and how much they're looking forward to Nats now if it's in a month's time. It just feels like the event was a huge success. I really can't think, none of the events ran late. Everything, well, not like late, 15-20 minutes late is not late for a card game tournament. Everything felt really smooth, really well organized. And also, I will say, finally, just the vendors we had there. We had 4 different vendors, Silver Palms, fleshandbloodcards.com. We had Collectibles One from Singapore, I think. And we had Mox in the Hole, who come from Scotland. All 4 of the vendors seemed like they were doing really sort of good trade and just sort of very friendly people to talk to. I talked and chatted to most of them over the weekend. The artists that were there were really good. So there was a really good effort put in to get that other stuff, the vendor side of things, the artist side of things done well. So I don't really have, as you can tell, I don't really have any complaints. I have feedback. I have things that maybe need looking into. But in general, my review of the event is that was really good. That was really positive. I'm UK biased, but the location was great. Even if you weren't from the UK, it was right next to an international airport, literally 20 minutes walk from an international airport, right next to a trunk train line, right next to about 7 hotels and about 10 restaurants within 10 minutes walk. The metas, everything was great about it. So my feedback, if you've listened this far, was the calling in the Birmingham was a huge success. I would highly invite everyone to come to the next one. UK Nats is going to be fantastic. Whether I'm there, not sure yet. I haven't qualified. As we said, I was taking a break, so I didn't really prepare for RTNs or get experience. And that is the way of the world. But, maybe I'll be there in another capacity. I'll chat to the organizers and see if there's something they want me to do. I could judge. I am a level 1 judge. I could cast if there is a stream that needs casting. We'll see. We'll see if I'm there. If I am, I look forward to seeing everyone who's there. If not, this was another episode of Steelfur Speaks. I am Steelfur and I talk. So that is where we go. Yeah. Have a great one. I hope you, if you were at Birmingham, had a great time. And I look forward to talking to you all very, very soon.